I am going to get us started. So first, I'd like to thank everybody who signed up and has been able to join us today. My name is Carla Brown. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Operations at the National Peace Corps Association. And as many of you probably have surmised, this session is really a great collaboration between the Peace Corps, which we are all part of that family, and the National Peace Corps Association. So again, I want to thank everybody for your attendance. If you wouldn't mind, if you could also just put your name and where you're from or where you served in the chat, we would love, as a way of welcoming and a hello, for you to do that. So please take your time and do that for us. Just as a bit of background, I have about 25 years of international development experience, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. And as many of you can imagine, it really started with my Peace Corps experience. So it is really an honor and a privilege to be able to support this relationship and to continue to help pass information about what has been going on with the community. The focus of this conversation is obviously the Inter-American and Pacific region. That is where we're focusing on. But really to talk about and to show the links between the various generations, what was historically happening and what's happening now that Peace Corps has gone back into many countries, several countries after the pandemic. The conversation will really be led by Peace Corps. We have 2 or 3 main actors from Peace Corps that are supporting us. There's Heather Thompson, who's the program specialist for the Office of Third Goal, RPCV, Return Volunteers. She's helping a lot with logistics. Big thank you for her to have gotten the speakers that are here today to support us. We will also have Gini Wilderson, who's currently the Peace Corps Director in the Samoa. She's been there since 2018. Gini has over 23 years of international development experience. A large portion of that is with Peace Corps in several roles, besides just the country director role. She has also been the director of programming and training, and of course, started as a Peace Corps volunteer as well. And then we have a Mr. Ken Puvak. He is currently the Chief of Operations for the Inter-American and Pacific Region. He supports 8 country programs and is working with countries that are new or potentially new countries as Peace Corps continues to roll out into reopen new programs. He has over 25 years of international development and business experience, of which a great deal of that has been spent with Peace Corps. His experience spans through a variety of regions. That includes Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. He has played the role of country director as well. He's been the director of program and training, and he's been the director of management and operations. So just to say that we have seen, we've got a lot of really great people here that are in a great position to kind of bring us up to date on what's going on in the field. So with that, I just want to pass this over to Ken so he can kick us off and give us an update. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carla. Like you, I think my journey with Peace Corps started in the Africa region. I then moved to Europe, Mediterranean, and Asia region, and I'm a recent transplant to the Inter-America and Pacific region. I must say, seeing the audience, I wish I'd had the list beforehand because I see a couple people in the room who know Inter-America and Pacific much better than I do, but I will go ahead anyway. As many of you know, we didn't always have an Inter-America and Pacific region. About 30 years ago, the agency went from 4 regions down to 3 and put the Inter-America and Pacific together. It's been, from all accounts, a great marriage. And if we could go to the next slide. The good news about IAP is coming out of the pandemic, we've done quite well in terms of return to service. We had, of the first 10 country programs in Peace Corps, 7 were IAP countries, mainly the IA of IAP, and we've returned to essentially 21 countries with over 1,100 volunteers in the field. Overall, Peace Corps has 2,700 volunteers in the field. As many of you know, pre-pandemic, we had over 7,000. So we're still on our way back to where we were. And it's going to take us a couple years to get there, but we're happy with the early progress in IAP. You can see the countries here. I won't go through them by name, but it includes, of course, North, Central, and South America and our Pacific countries. Gini will be talking to us a little bit later about what's going on in Samoa, but we're going to cover a few of the other countries first. In terms of what projects Peace Corps is involved in, Peace Corps, as many of you would know, has 6 broad sectors it works in. You can see that in the top table of agriculture, community economic development, education, environment, health, and youth. And, you know, we're pretty well represented in our countries across those sectors. Of course, education being our largest project, as it has always, or at least I think it has always been one of our larger projects. In terms of the other service models that we also have 12 posts that have Peace Corps response programs. Does everybody know what Peace Corps response is? Can anybody come off mute and tell me what Peace Corps response is?
I guess I could hop in. It's like a shorter term, higher impact Peace Corps assignment that's more specialized. I say that because I was a Peace Corps response volunteer in Mexico.
Yes, that's correct. Shorter term assignments, typically in the range of 3 to 12 months. A program that's been around with Peace Corps for, I think, over 25 years now. And as you see, 12 of our posts have Peace Corps response placements. As you can imagine, a lot of host countries ask us for additional, for extra expertise, and it's through response that we're able to fill those requests in the main. And something relatively new to Peace Corps is the virtual service pilot, and we have 11 posts that are involved in the virtual service participant program. And that is exactly what you would think it is, the people who serve virtually. And in many of our countries, we are trying very much to integrate these 3 models of service: our traditional 2-year placements, which you all know, the Peace Corps response model, the shorter term placements, and virtual service pilot. Next slide. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that are new at Peace Corps, or things that have been happening since the return to service back in 2022. One of those at the forefront has been working in the area of climate. And one of the things that IAP has done is to hold 2 climate summits, one in Panama for the IAP portion of IAP, and then another in Fiji for the Pacific Post. 94% of our posts, almost every single post, has created a post-climate action plan. There are monies made available to support climate action. As many of you know, there's the Small Project Assistance Program with monies from USAID that we draw upon. And more volunteers are helping their communities tap into those resources in order to support climate action. Closer to home, in terms of the offices, many of our offices are looking at using solar energy at their offices. Just out in Samoa, is it Samoa? Of course, Gini, you'll remind me. We did just complete the solar project, right?
We did, and I'll talk about that a little bit in my remarks as well.
Okay, so I won't talk over you. Thank you. Hybrid vehicles, and Peace Corps Costa Rica actually has received a sustainability award from the host government for its efforts to be more climate friendly and more have a more sustainable operation. Next slide. One of the most exciting things I think going on for us is an initiative in the Pacific called the Blue Pacific Youth Initiative. And Gini's team in Samoa and our other Pacific posts have worked very closely together to build an initiative based upon an initiative and a blueprint that is really out of the Pacific leadership, the Pacific countries themselves, called Blue Pacific 2050, a blueprint for their response to the climate challenge. And what we've done is, what they've done as a group is to hone an initiative geared towards really action at a community level. And you can see the elements here of climate literacy, of assessment, of adaptation and resilience, camps, clubs, and networks, one of our, core activities in many of our countries, and then climate summits and exchanges. And I think it's a really exciting thing. And I think, Gini, you may be talking about it a little bit later from a Samoa perspective. But this has caught a lot of attention. There was a recent workshop for youth leaders with 16 youth leaders from the 4 countries involved that got together in Vanuatu and Fiji to learn from each other and essentially go back to their respective communities and develop climate action plans. Next slide, please. Another area where IEP has put a lot of attention is on something known as host country volunteerism. For all of you that know Peace Corps well, we love our acronyms. So the acronym for this one is HOKOVO. Not necessarily my favorite, but it's a favorite idea. I mean, this idea of promoting host country volunteerism goes back to our initial legislation back in 1961. It's something that we've worked on over the years. One of the things I'd highlight from this slide is the launch of the Central American Service Corps just last month in Guatemala. The First Lady of Guatemala actually helped to launch the initiative. Peace Corps is providing whatever support it can. It is sometimes just sharing information and our experience with organizations that are promoting host country volunteerism. Sometimes it's working side by side. It's whatever the host organizations want us to do, but we're very excited about broadening the idea of volunteerism to host country national youth that we can support. Next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight a few country-specific initiatives, and some of these things may seem a little out of our lane, but when you think about what was going on during those 2 years of the pandemic, we looked to see whether we could do some some staff-led activities, and our staff in Belize were asked to help the police and to help them in responding to sexual assaults, particularly in the area of building in a trauma-informed response. So this has been very well received in Belize and greatly appreciated, and our staff are continuing to do it. It's not something that they continue to do. They're really actually working now to try to train others to carry on the work they did during the period before we were able to return to service. Next slide, please. And in the DER, I've got a long history of working in literacy, and one of the things that the team has been able to do is bring together volunteers and counterparts on a certification program in the area of becoming reading promoters. So there's now a nationwide initiative whereby the ministry trains youth as mentors and tutors for young readers. So really, in this case, expanding beyond what volunteers and counterparts can do to engage young people to help as mentors and tutors. Next slide. Then in the case, we just want to highlight an activity from Jamaica where they've used some micro grants funds to support a youth climate expo and fair. They had 14 schools involved, and they got the kids involved in essays and poster design and other poetry to promote climate action. So just one more thing that Peace Corps is trying to do in the area of climate. Next slide. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Gini to talk more specifically about Peace Corps Samoa.
Thank you, Ken. Hello, Falava. Hello from Samoa, where it is Friday morning at 9:20 a.m. So hello from the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm Gini Wilderson. I'm the Peace Corps Samoa Country Director, and I've had the honor of serving as Country Director in Samoa for a little over 6 years now. I'm also an RPCV. I served in Lesotho as a small business volunteer from 1995 to 97, which was 29 years ago, I'm realizing. Yeah. So time is flying. I'm very thrilled to have this opportunity to share with the MPCA members today highlights of the exciting work that Peace Corps is currently engaged in Samoa. And I'm also just really happy to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. Roger Conrad, Dan Baker, Kate Raftery, hello, good morning. Some of the folks that I've had the pleasure and honor of working alongside in my previous roles at Peace Corps headquarters and also working for Peace Corps Jamaica. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start off with a little bit about the independent state of Samoa, just to kind of set the scene. We're located in the South Pacific. We're on the other side of the international date line from American Samoa. So while American Samoa is a short 30-minute flight from where we are in the independent state of Samoa, the time difference is 23 hours in the past. So when we hop on the plane and fly over there, it's yesterday, 30 minutes from, after arrival or departure. So we're 90 minutes from Fiji, 4 hours from New Zealand, 5 hours from Hawaii, and 6 hours from Australia. Next slide, please. So we're composed of, Samoa is composed of 2 main islands, Upolu and Savaii. And there's also a smaller island in the middle, Manono, where we pre-pandemic did have 2 Peace Corps volunteers assigned to Manono. It's very small. You can walk around the entire island in about an hour. The distance between Upolu and Savaii is about 1 hour by ferry. Our office is located on Upolu in the capital city of Apia. And the population of the whole country is 200,000 Samoans. So it's pretty small geographically. Next slide. So Samoa is a country of great natural beauty. You've got beaches, mountains, lava fields, palm trees, and pretty much a rainbow every day. Next slide. So for today's presentation, I was asked to talk about any updates from Samoa and just what is something that we're proud of that's happening in this country. And the answer is there's lots to be proud of, and I'm happy to share some of those achievements with you today. Next slide. Starting with, we're very proud of our stellar reputation. Peace Corps has been in Samoa for 57 years consecutively, and there's just instant brand recognition. We're not the only international volunteer sending organization. JICA has a volunteer presence here. The Australians, the New Zealanders also have volunteer programs, as does the United Nations. But we are the international volunteer partner of choice. As far as the Samoan government is concerned, all international volunteers in Samoa are called Pisikoa, no matter where they come from. So whether they're a UNV or a JICA volunteer, everybody's known as a Pisikoa, a Peace Corps volunteer. Samoans from all walks of life, if we could go back, sorry. Samoans from all walks of life have shared their stories with me about how a Peace Corps volunteer has positively impacted their life. This goes from the Prime Minister on down. Either they were taught by a PCV, they worked with them, their family hosted them, or they were friends with them, or they married them. That happens a lot here, it seems. Many attribute their success later in life to their connection with Peace Corps. Next slide. So over the years, volunteers in Samoa have served in a variety of sectors and programs. They've been high school science and math teachers, health volunteers, engineers. And in fact, the first outdoor toilet in Samoa was developed by a Peace Corps volunteer. And to this day, it is known as the Whale Pisikoa, or the Peace Corps House. Next slide. So as I'm sure you're all aware, Peace Corps volunteers worldwide were evacuated from their posts in March of 2020 due to the global pandemic. Immediately following the evacuation, the Samoan government closed its borders for 3 years in an effort to protect its citizens. So during this 3-year gap with no volunteers, there was also no COVID in Samoa due to the border closure. So Samoans were able to go about their daily lives, COVID-free. There was no masking, no social distancing. So our Peace Corps staff, who we all remained, leveraged this opportunity to continue the mission of the Peace Corps during this time by conducting 17 staff-led projects. One of the projects involved our Peace Corps medical unit collaborating with Samoa's Ministry of Health to administer COVID vaccinations to school children throughout the country. And this effort contributed to Samoa reaching its goal of vaccinating 95% of the entire population. And once that goal was reached, the country reopened its borders. So Peace Corps Samoa is proud to have been a part of this public health success story. Next slide. In December of 2022, I had the pleasure of renewing our 5-year MOU between Peace Corps Samoa and the Ministry of Education to continue our English literacy program, which is our primary program here in Samoa. Pre-COVID, the Minister of Education, who you see to my left in the photo here, he was actually one of our counterparts. He was a primary school principal, and he supervised several PCVs over the years. So he's a staunch supporter of Peace Corps and a very strong partner. Next slide. So the Peace Corps English literacy program is extremely important in Samoa. Primary students who, their first language is Samoan, but they need to sit for high school entrance exams at the primary school level, at the end of the primary school level, to enter high school. And all of the high school entrance exams are conducted in English. So how well they're able to do on those high school entrance exams determines which high school they get accepted to. And not all high schools are created equal. So literally we tell our volunteers that they have the future of their students in their hands. So they can open doors to them that they might not otherwise be able to go through. Next slide. The English literacy program allows Samoan students to learn from native English speakers. Next slide. The volunteers assess their students' English literacy abilities at the beginning and end of each school year. Next slide. So what we've seen over the years consistently, classrooms with an English literacy Peace Corps volunteer show significant improvement on those annual assessments year over year. And the gentleman on the far left, may be a familiar face to many of you. That is our regional director, Mike McCabe, who was in Samoa just in time for the renewal of our MOU with the Ministry of Education. Next slide. So the test scores that I was mentioning are reflected in the Ministry of Education's annual report to their parliament. And they highlight the value that the Peace Corps volunteers bring through to Samoan students through our English literacy program. Next slide. Next slide. Something else that we're proud of, Ken mentioned or touched on this earlier. Last year, we did launch a solar panel program. We installed 120 solar panels on the roof of our office. And so this project allows us to produce enough power to run our office operations. And it helps us realize the cost savings, and it has a positive environmental effect. Next slide. So last year, after a 3-year absence, we welcomed back our first group of Peace Corps volunteers post-COVID. Next slide. The Ministry of Education and Culture, as they traditionally do, welcomed back our RPCVs with a traditional AVA welcome ceremony. Next slide. So this event is widely covered in the media. It's televised, it was discussed on the radio, and it made the front page of the national newspaper, announcing to the entire country that the Peace Corps is back. Next slide. And here we framed the newspaper announcing the arrival of the return of Peace Corps volunteers to Samoa. Coincidentally, the headline that day, also on the front page of the paper, was about the decline in the literacy rates, 60% failure rate. That was announced on the same day that our volunteers arrived. So the return of Peace Corps volunteers is, just very much welcomed in Samoa as a way to kind of help turn that around. Next slide. And here's a photo of our newly arrived volunteers with our ambassador, the U.S. ambassador, who was there for the welcoming ceremony, the return of volunteers to Samoa. We do not have a U.S. embassy here in Samoa. Our embassy is actually in New Zealand. And so the ambassador to New Zealand has oversight over New Zealand as well as Samoa. So he traveled here for the ABA ceremony to return volunteers back into service. The other thing to point out is that as our embassy is not here, Peace Corps is the face of the U.S. government in Samoa. We're the only USG entity outside of our U.S. consulate. Next slide. And this is our first swearing in ceremony post-COVID. We have 15 volunteers in country now. So we welcomed back 2 cohorts last year. And our next group of 14 English literacy trainees arrives next week. So it's exciting times for us. Next slide. Communities, as I said, are very excited that our volunteers are back to work, promoting the mission of the Peace Corps and working to improve their students and their children's literacy. Next slide. So the English literacy program is very structured. Our volunteers' days are very full. Next slide. They conduct pull-out groups 2 to 3 times per day, 5 days per week for students who need the most assistance. Next slide. Next slide. They also co-teach with a Samoan teacher to build their teaching capacity. Next slide. Next slide. And if we have a little video clip here. If we could launch that. Volunteer work. Good. Thank you. Next slide. And finally, our volunteers also, part of their project is to help establish or enhance school libraries. So they bring in library resource materials, and then they conduct programs in those libraries. Next slide. The goal is to instill a love of reading on behalf of their students. Next slide. So here you can see students lining up at lunchtime to get to go to the library and check out their favorite books. Next slide. And this is the inside of a typical school library. Next slide. Our volunteers live with a Samoan host family during their 2 years of service. This is really important, that they have that support, that built-in support. Samoa is very community-oriented, very family-oriented, and so it's really helpful that our volunteers are able to be a part of that structure. Next slide. We did also welcome back our first post-COVID response volunteer. This is Marianne. She's assigned to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment on a 6-month assignment as a communications advisor, helping to promote the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment's environmental awareness programs. Next slide. Something else that we're really proud of is that in 2023, we commissioned a report detailing the youth and climate networks that exist in Samoa. And this is the first time that this information has been compiled in one place. And it helps us and our partners to identify what work is already being done in this space and where there may be opportunities to address unaddressed needs. And we're also in discussions right now with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, based on this information, to establish an environment program. So they reached out to us once they saw the findings to create a program where we would place climate-focused volunteers at the district levels in 10 districts in Samoa to start, to assist our communities with climate mitigation efforts. And we're hoping to invite volunteers to this program as early as next July. Next slide. Tree planting is also now a part of our pre-service training. Our trainees, when they arrive, they are put to work quickly to plant 200 trees to help offset the impact of their air travel to Samoa. Next slide. And as Ken mentioned, one of the big initiatives this year has been the rollout of the Peace Corps Blue Pacific Youth Initiative. So Peace Corps Samoa is very pleased to be a part of this effort. We've identified 4 Samoan youth who were part of that Youth Champions Exchange and Travel Program to participate in this important effort that's impacting the future of youth throughout the Pacific. Next slide. And finally, I am extremely proud of our team here in Samoa. I mean, this is probably the smallest staff in all of Peace Corps, but they are the most hardworking, committed, dedicated individuals who are working tirelessly day in and day out on behalf of Peace Corps, our volunteers, our ministry partners, and our communities to achieve our common goal of a sustainable future for Samoa. And on the right, that's our US direct hire management team. So that's Katie Tongia on my left, who is our Director of Management and Operations. She's also an RPCV from the Pacific, Tonga. And our newest arrival, Liz Heidenreich, is on my right. She is our Director of Programming and Training, also an RPCV, serving in Southeast Asia. So we have an excellent team here, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have spent these last 6 years with them. Next slide. So, you know, as part of the Each One Reach One campaign, I would like to encourage you all, RPCVs, to think about serving again as a volunteer, and then also, you know, spread the word widely amongst your networks that, you know, Peace Corps is back in business, doing a lot of important, exciting work. There's a lot of support for and need for Peace Corps volunteers at this time. Next slide. So again, thank you, Afafatai Talelava. Thank you so much for your previous service. I hope that you will consider serving again or considering those in your networks to serve. And if you do, I hope that you will make Samoa your top choice for a place to land. So thank you so much.
So Ken and Gini, I just want to say thank you so much. I think, you know, you've just helped to open up such a very rich discussion. We're seeing such wonderful things that are happening. I think it just makes us all, you know, proud again for being RPCVs. I'm going to pass this over to Heather. She's going to, there have been questions posed in the chat. She's going to navigate that so that we can, there may be some responses that, you know, things that you, the two of you can respond to. Assuming that there may be some time left, then we'll just open the mic and allow some other questions to come. So that the conversation, you know, we can learn more. So Heather,
Thanks,
over to you.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to let Diane speak for a moment to explain a little bit more. In case you haven't heard of what Each One Reach One is, she's going to go ahead and explain for us. And maybe in the meantime, if you have any questions that have come up, you can start adding those to the chat. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Diane Glover. I am currently serving as the Special Assistant for InterAmericans in the Pacific. I'm also RPCV Philippines, so Pacific Island, but not in the way Samoa is. We're still confused. But 2018 to 2020, so part of the evacuated group. Lots of stories there. So yes, Each One Reach One is basically how I learned about Peace Corps and how I ended up serving. In college, an RPCV was just talking to, actually not even to me directly. He just said that he lived in Fiji for 2 years with the Peace Corps, and that sparked my curiosity over Peace Corps, and then followed by 8 months of research and application, and then eventually going to the Philippines as a youth and development volunteer. So all of that to say, Each One Reach One is just, as a RPCV who I'm assuming is, you know, believes in the goal of Peace Corps, your words matter more now so than ever, as we are trying to increase our presence back in our posts. You don't know who's listening to you or who you're inspiring, but any chance to kind of promote your time in Peace Corps and Peace Corps in general would be extremely helpful. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I just put a link to the Each One Reach One toolkit that's available to all RPCVs. There's a flyer in there, as well as multiple other one-sheet facts and figures about Peace Corps and some ready to go social media images. If you would like to help reach out to your network and your family and friends and get the word out there about the great things that Peace Corps is back in the field doing. I see one question from Dan to Gini. He was asking, what is the right size, in your opinion, for a small island program like Samoa? Like, what would be the right size program or size cohort, given the number of qualified PCVs and the resources to support them?
Sure. So pre-COVID, or even now, our annual trainee input request is 30 volunteers per input. And so when we have overlapping, groups, at our full onboard, we usually have about 60 volunteers on island at any given time. And that seemed to be a good, kind of a sweet spot. There's hundreds of schools in Samoa, a few hundred. So we had pre-pandemic volunteers in 60 of those schools. But the demand is high. The Ministry of Education would love to have a volunteer in every school. So there's lots of room for expansion. For our environment program that we are in discussions with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment about, there are 51 districts in Samoa. And so MNRE is thinking that they would like to start off with 10 volunteers, placing 1 volunteer in 10 districts. So that's what we're aiming for.
Thank you so much, Gini, and thank you for your presentation. It's amazing. I want to go back. I want to go to Samoa.
Come on down.
Yeah.